Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. This week's video is going to be another entry in my Graduate Reality Diaries series, and today's video is going to be all about fellowships. What exactly is a fellowship, how to apply for a fellowship, and how fellowships are really important and will benefit you in your scientific career. So let's get into the video. So what exactly is a research fellowship? A research fellowship is an opportunity that allows you as a scientist to fund yourself to pursue all of your research endeavors. So you'll get like a supply of funding or money from an institution, whether that be a university, government agency, some kind of like research institute, and they will pay you to carry out your research. You'll use this money to kind of pay your own salary, pay for any research materials that you might need, and you can also use this money to support traveling. If you want to present your research findings, perhaps like meet up with some collaborators, you can use some of that money to travel as well. You can apply to fellowships at either the graduate level or even like the postgraduate level. It really just depends, but fellowships are meant to support early career scientists in general. Fellowships are very, very prestigious, mainly because it's extremely competitive to receive a fellowship award. You have a bunch of different people from all disciplines of science applying for some of the same fellowships, and there's only like a limited pool of money, and the committees in which read all of these applications can only select like a handful. So if you're fortunate enough to win a fellowship award, then you're viewed to be very like credible. It almost like deems your work to be very important. That is not to say that even if you don't win a fellowship award, it does not mean that your work is not important. It's academia. It's meant to make you feel terrible. The bar is very, very low when it comes to academia. Please keep that in mind. But your work is important, I swear. But when you're awarded fellowships, people just believe you more often in science, and it makes people want to give you more awards. You can still be plenty successful without fellowships if you have great supervisors and if you publish journals that are heavily cited. So as a graduate student, having a fellowship is really important because when your PI or your supervisor runs out of funding to be able to pay your salary, you can apply for a fellowship, and if you're awarded, you can just pay yourself, which is really nice. Because at times money can get a bit tight with your supervisors and they might not have the means to pay you. That doesn't mean that you're going to be without funding. Please keep in mind, if you're a grad student and your supervisor doesn't have funding, you can always get paid by being a teaching assistant or a TA. If you have any questions about that, watch my last video on TAing. One thing I will say is that even if you aren't awarded a fellowship after putting in an application, I think it's still good to get the practice of writing a fellowship. Once you become a scientist actively working in the field, you write grants and proposals to be able to fund yourself anyways. So it's good to get in the habit of writing fellowships or like proposal applications just because you're going to be doing it in the future anyways. It's good practice to like advocate for yourself, make an outline of like your research goals and like statements, methodology, because that's what goes into applying for a fellowship. As an active scientist, you might need additional funding and support from outside of your institution, from like the government, for example. If you need new materials for like a lab experiment, that's very expensive and your salary isn't going to cover it. Or, you know, if you want extra computing time on this supercomputer and it's very expensive to do so. So you'll apply for grants and fellowships in your senior career stages. What I'm trying to say is it's good to start getting into that habit early. It's a way to practice writing, which I'm not very good at, so I'm glad that I got the practice. So the application process typically consists of writing like a research proposal where you will outline what your research goal is. You'll put some like background of, you know, where the research like stems from, if there are any motivating results from other publications or other scientists that will then motivate why you want to pursue this research goal. You will also outline like a methodology and like a laid out plan of how you're going to conduct this research. You'll want to include specific techniques that you'll use, any kind of like data that you're going to be using, whether that be from a telescope, a simulation. It'd be nice to include some collaborators that you'll be working with. It's also required that you have like a mentor, someone that you can go to that will be able to assist you, and make sure that you have all of the resources and tools necessary to carry out everything. And depending on what fellowship you're applying to as well, they might require like a personal statement. It's pretty much just like a general personal statement. You kind of give some personal background, what institute you're coming from, some of your goals, how you plan to impact your community, what is going to be like the bigger picture of how your research project can enhance the scientific community, as well as just like, your local community, people who are not in academia. The agencies or the institutions that have the money to fund these fellowships, or like, the fellows, they want to choose the scientists that are going to make them look good across the board. So not just within the field, but like, at an international level, or whether that be a national or statewide level, like they want to know that you are going to bring lasting impact across a wide variety of people, because it makes them look better. You're welcome. You're doing their dirty work almost. So I recently just applied for my first fellowship through the NSF, or the National Science Foundation. They have like a graduate program fellowship that grad students can apply for. It is very competitive, as I mentioned before. I think it's like 55,000 people apply like yearly across all sciences, and they only give out like 10,000 awards or something like that. So I don't even know how many people in astronomy get awarded. I've been told that it's very biased. It's typically people from like all of the Ivy Leagues that get awarded. So we'll see if I get it. Anyways, but it was a very interesting application process. I definitely learned a lot. It was very taxing, mainly because there was so much work that I put into it. And yeah, like I mentioned before, your girl's is not a very good writer. So it took a lot of ironing out the wrinkles in both my personal statement and my research statement. But in the end, I think it was worth it, because I wrote something that I was really proud of. So even if I don't win it, whatever, fuck them. I wrote something that I'm proud of, which I cannot say I do very often. So there were two parts to the NSF proposal. There was a personal statement and there was a research statement. And my research statement, I just wrote like, here's a general background of some of the work that I do. Here is the bigger picture and how it impacts astronomy. Why is this so important to astronomy and galaxy theory? Then I led into my main question that I'm going to be answering, then constructed the rest of my research statement. It was like, okay, this research project consists of these two different components. Went into detail about the two components that I listed, how I'm going to do that. And then I had like two last sections, kind of just like hyping myself up, almost be like, well, I know this many people worldwide in the astronomy community who can help me get this done. They're very resourceful. And I talked about how this can be like impactful to the community that I serve. YouTube was mentioned, for example. Also the planetarium, introducing astronomy to children of all backgrounds, like all ages from K through 12. So that's all for the research statement. And then my personal statement, I think, was probably a bit harder for me to write, because I am not my own hype man. I am the best hype man for other people, but not myself. So it's hard to like write about myself and try to hype myself up. Like, okay, here is why I'm the best astronomer and you should fund me. But I ended up getting it done. Thank you to all of my supervisors, as well as all of my friends in the grad program who helped me review everything. Lastly, I will give a few like tips and tricks and like recommendations for what to do, things that I did when I wrote my application materials. The biggest piece of advice that I got someone is to have your application reviewed by multiple people. You literally want to send your materials and your statements to everybody. Actually, not everybody. I'm going to get into that in a second, but not everybody. So who you want to send it to is definitely your PI, any mentors that you have. Another thing I would recommend doing is sending it to anyone that you know who has been successful in winning the award before. They can be able to help you like refine your application and structure things, kind of, sort of, not really, but similar to theirs, since they've won it clearly. Like they will have advice, they can give you advice, they can even send you their materials. Why I say don't send it to too many people is because at one point I had like 12 people on a Google Doc, all typing and leaving comments under both of my statements. And it was so overwhelming. Like even like the day of the application being due, I had an overleaf document up and there were 6 people all making comments, changing things, deleting things, moving things. And I was like, my ADHD cannot do this. Like, I don't know what's happening. I'm like, I thought that this statement looked so good, but I'd taken and addressed everyone's comments off of Google Doc. I had like hundreds of comments. It was insane. I addressed all of those comments, and then still on Overleaf, people are leaving me more comments and I don't know how to address them. It was so stressful, okay? So maybe not 12 people, but I would say have like, I don't know, 5 to 8 people leave you comments. And if they're not leaving you like good constructive comments, don't have them look at it again because they don't want to see you win. Another thing I did is I tried to have a rough draft of my statements finished a month before the application was due. You want to make sure that you give people time to review things, and you also want to make sure that you give yourself time to take those comments into account. I had all of my materials done a month before the deadline, and I think I would give everybody like a week. Like, you have a week to read this. Please get comments back to me within the next week so then I can have like a second round of rough draft for you to read the next time. And then after, give them like maybe a week and a half or so to review it, have them give you more comments. And then the third time, you know, that'll be the final time for them to give you comments. And hopefully your statement will be perfected by then, or you will end up like me. Your statement isn't perfect and people are still giving comments even after sending it 4 times. One thing that I forgot to mention is it's actually required that you have letters of recommendation sent in as part of your application too. So one thing I would recommend is meeting up with your letter writers and telling them specifically what you want them to talk about, you know? I had my undergraduate supervisor write me a letter of rec, and she was there to experience how much like I struggled like mentally, emotionally, and financially in undergrad. I wrote about some of that in my personal statement, and she could attest to that. So I was like, I want you to write about some of this in your letter of rec. You could be able to show and attest for all of like my resilience that I showed, as well as like determination through some of those like hard times. I had one supervisor, I was like, I just want you to talk about how many conferences I've been to, as well as all of the connections that I've met since being in your research group, you know, things like that. You want to tell them specifics, what you want them to talk about. So that way it seems more personable and it's not very like generic. 'Cause I know for the fellowship I applied for, they had like a solicitation documentation, like here's what we're looking for, here's how the committee is going to be judging based off of like your merits. What you can do is like copy and paste some of that wording and language that they use in that documentation and send it to your supervisors or your letters of rec and be like, I want you to incorporate some of this language into your letter so I have a higher chance of, you know, being recognized by the committee. Another piece that I will say is avoid using passive language. And I know this could be difficult depending on the kind of person that you are. Like I said earlier, I don't really like talking about myself. I am not my own hype man, unfortunately. So I would use language like, I hope to do this. I was so grateful for this opportunity. No, don't talk like that, okay? Be very direct. Be like, I will do this. I have done this. I won this. Talk like things like that. Be very assertive. You don't want to be passive. You want to tell the committee that you're writing to, you are a total badass. You are the smartest person in the world. Who is Einstein? I don't know. You know what I mean? You want to use that kind of language, okay? Be your own biggest hype man. If you're not, they might not consider you. They want someone that like exudes confidence, you know, someone that is going to be a standout of the crowd. Even though it might be hard, it was definitely hard for me, but try to use very assertive language. I think one of the grads even suggested, she was like, you just need to listen to some like bad bitch music. Like you need to play some like Meg Thee Stallion, some Doja Cat, music like that. So anything that like puts you in that like, yeah, headspace, listen to that like kind of music or watch that movie in the background, anything that makes you feel like superhuman. And I think this is probably going to be my actual last piece of advice is definitely take breaks when you need it. Putting together this proposal was extremely stressful, especially because I have a lot going on. I've mentioned this before. I have 3 conferences coming up, very, very busy with work. So it was very hard to try to fit this all into my schedule, and I didn't really take a lot of breaks. So be very kind to yourself in this process because it is very overwhelming, it's overstimulating, and especially that you will be writing this when you're in grad school. There's a lot going on in grad school. There's life going on outside of classes and research as well. So be very kind to yourself. When you're done and when you've submitted that proposal, go and celebrate. Go live life. Get your favorite coffee, your favorite tea, ice cream, go eat a huge meal, go crash on the couch and watch your favorite movie in your favorite pajamas. That is my last piece of advice. Advice which I did not take, but once conference season is over, then maybe I will do that. With that, I will bring this video to a close. Thank you so much for watching. If you have made it this far in the video, feel free to give it a like. Go ahead and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. If you have any more questions for me about fellowships or just like funding in general, feel free to leave it down in the comments. I answer to everybody and I look forward to getting comments, so feel free to leave one if you want. Again, thank you so much for watching and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.